and welcome back to my motorhome stroke van with windows camper van build video series. I connected up the water system and decided to test it. That was yesterday. Everything had been done and I pressurized it by switching on the pump, and as expected I had some leaks from various glands, particularly these push fit fittings here. I replaced some of them with a slightly different make and it all worked fine, no more leaks. An area under the sink, I'll let it stripped out just for a minute whilst I'm messing around with the pipes. A couple of the tap connectors there, BSP tap connectors, they were leaking, so I had to replace those. I've moved the pipes slightly, so I've got to tidy all that up and put the shelves back in, move some of the clips and things. But that's all now absolutely fine. The waste pipe's connected to the sink and that works fine. The pump was switched on and the system pressurized and pressurized and pressurized, and I couldn't figure out what was going on because the pump didn't stop. I thought it was air trapped in the pipe, so I bled all the system, made sure all the air was out of the pipe, and the pump was running and everything was fine. I didn't get any leaks. And then all of a sudden there was a huge bang and water sprayed out of a pipe, this one here, sprayed out all over the inside of the van, covering everything with water, covered my Truma with water, sprayed water absolutely everywhere, everything got absolutely drenched. Obviously I switched the pump off straight away and put the taps on and released the pressure in the system, and we spent the rest of the day mopping up. Fortunately, when I put all my cabinets and things like that in, I put this T-trim on the bottoms of the ply cabinet, and in doing that I saved the plywood from getting wet, but I did have a huge amount of water on the floor. It was a major problem. So what went wrong? Well, let me show you the pipe. This is the piece of pipe that I cut out that burst, and everything looks absolutely fine. But when you bend the pipe, if I can just get my camera in the right position here, when you bend the pipe you can see there's a split. I don't know whether you can pick that up on the camera. Let me just see if I can show you. This pipe's actually quite stiff. There, you can see the pipe literally burst. None of the connectors came off. Can you see that all right? Yes, I think so. None of the connectors came off. None of the glands, the push fit fittings burst off or anything like that, but the pipe burst. As you can appreciate, I was extremely confused, and I decided that it was a faulty piece of pipe, or I must have nicked it accidentally with a cutting knife or something. So I replaced all that and pressurized the system again. Everything was fine, but the pressure kept on rising. The pump did not switch off, and I was extremely confused about that. Now, as you can see here, I've got a 5-stage reverse osmosis water filtration system, and this has a pressure gauge on it. And when I switched it back on this morning and pressurized it up, I noticed that the pressure gauge on the water filtration system was reading 85 psi. Now I've only got a 45 psi sure flow pump, and it was still going, and the pressure was still rising, and I was watching it on here thinking, oh my, I'm going to have to switch that off. So I switched it off. Now I'm sure I'm going to be criticised about this, but I couldn't figure out why a 45 psi pump was shoving it all the way up to over 80 psi. Until I did a little bit of research online, and there is a pressure adjuster on this shore flow pump, and obviously it was set too high. Now, stupidly, well, I just didn't know, and I'm sure a lot of other builders out there perhaps don't realise. The pressure switch is the bit at the bottom of the pump. Underneath here, there is a small screw. Turning that screw can increase or decrease the pressure required to switch this pressure cutout switch on and off. Now I'll try and get the camera underneath so I can show you. Probably won't be able to, but let's have a look. Perhaps not. Turn it upside down. Under there is a screw. So having taken the pump out, disconnected it all, I rotated the screw in to the decrease position. It's just a little posi drive headed screw, and that reduced the pressure the pump goes to. So now I've set it so it only goes up to 40 psi, and sure enough, on my reverse osmosis filtration system you can see perhaps the gauge there. It's reading 40 psi. If I'd known better, I would have mounted that pump the other way up so I could easily get at the adjusting screw. And I advise any of you that put in a pump like this to make sure that adjusting screw is accessible. Now I can just about get a posi drive in there and turn it with a spanner to adjust it, but I think if I was building this again I would mount the pump the other way up to make it easier. And well, I hope this will be a warning to those that don't know, and I didn't know, that these pumps can actually go well over their rated pressure unless you decrease the pressure for the cutout switch. Now the whole system is pressurized. I haven't got any leaks. Well, actually that's not quite true. I've got a slight drip from one of the shower fittings, which I'm going to just nip up a little bit in a minute. But I just want to talk about this 5-stage reverse osmosis water filtration system that is now pressurized up as well. It has its own pump, which I can use when on site. It's a very quiet pump, and that will pressurize that system to a higher pressure for the reverse osmosis system to function. It does work, and I've got my little tap here, and if I can turn that on, as you can see I've got nice fresh pure water coming out, although the little storage reservoir hasn't fully filled up yet. You can hear that pump. It's actually very quiet, and you can see that that pump puts its internal pressure up to nearly 100 psi, and there my little pump has just started. That's much noisier. But it's all working now, and hopefully when the pressure gets up to 40 psi, that should switch off. So I'll just wait and see for a second. There you go. So that is now switching off absolutely fine. The other thing I noticed with these push-fit fittings, they're much harder to push in when you actually use the little inserts that go in the pipe. And I hadn't used some inserts on these, and they were pushing in quite nicely, and they didn't leak. But since then I've replaced this type with this type in many areas, and I've used the push-in inserts. They take a hell of a lot of force to push in past the little O-ring that's in there, and you should bear in mind that once in, you can't actually see the insert in the pipe. They go in quite a long way. And that's my reverse osmosis system filling up this container. It's actually not filling it up very full at the moment. I'm going to have to spend some time filling it up. So that's all working absolutely fine now, and indeed we're running off solar energy for the pump. I'm not actually using very much battery power at all. That's all working great. Also, my water gauge is working really nicely as well. I've got it on a meter, so I can switch it off to save electrical energy. And this meter is connected to the top of the tank just here, and there's a level gauge, a level float system in there. Let me show you that. For my water level gauge, I've chosen this 190 ohm sliding float sensor system. It goes into the top of the tank, and a little float goes up and down. It sends a signal to a meter on my control panel. I've chosen this rather than the more normal motorhome water level sensors because I'm quite used to using them. I use them on my yacht, and it gives a more accurate and linear reading of the water level than the normal motorhome ones. That then goes to the control panel, to this CUS water gauge, plugs in on the control panel and gives me a more linear reading of the water level. So yes, it's all now working. Unfortunately, the water went on top of the Truma heating system, which I put in just here. I don't think any got into the electronics, but I haven't even tried to use that Truma system yet. I wanted to get the water system sorted out first. Fingers crossed. It's a very expensive piece of kit.